From what I've seen, and again, I don't want to pass judgment on every school in our district. From what I've seen, for example, in the long-term suspension request, first thing I ask for is where is the student statement, where are the witness statements, because very often what I've seen, and again, I'm only looking at the paperwork, what I've seen are the adults who very often say, this child did this, please suspend him for 6 months or 3 months or 4 months or so 30 days. But very often I don't hear the other side of the story. And we need to put in place a system that really looks at due process, that the adults and the child, they both have to prove. I believe in the hearings, those things tend to happen. But even at the principal suspension level, we need to make sure that due process is being followed. And if and students, I don't know if our students know this, they can challenge suspensions. In other words, a principal can suspend and they can appeal to the superintendent. They say, well, I was suspended for this, and I'm appealing the suspension based on this fact. And it's my job to actually look at the facts and make a decision. And if the principal is wrong, to expunge the suspension. If the principal is right, to uphold the suspension. And if a child thinks that I'm wrong, they have a right to appeal my decision to the commissioner, which is Richard Mills up in Albany. So there are multiple steps that we can do, that kids can follow. But you're right, that we need to make sure there's due process, one, and to make sure that we have alternative to suspensions. And number three, that we have an environment where teachers feel safe and kids feel safe.
There's the teacher-student relationship is, I understand, is an important aspect. Can you elaborate on that? And do you have any ideas on how to improve in that area?
It's all about relationship. It really is. Because if you have students who respect teachers, they'll learn. And if you have teachers who respect kids, they'll be able to teach, and kids will learn as well. So it's all about that relationship. And I often tell people that what works, what we need to talk about is the student-teacher relationship with instructional materials. So the unit that matters the most for me is the classroom, what teachers do with students and the books and the instructional materials. There are many ways you can make that really work. Many of our schools are small. So for us to talk about how do we make that relationship personal, I think is tremendously important. In a school that's big, like East High School, for example, is to develop a communities, or what we call small learning communities. We have a set of adults who are responsible for a group of kids for multiple years. In education, we call that looping. For example, the same person who teaches you math may teach you math for 2 years or 3 years. So they get to know you really, really well. They get to know what you like about math, what you don't like about math, what you're good at and what you're not so good at, so they can help you. So when you have looping, the same teachers teaching the same group of kids for more than 1 year, you develop that sort of personal relationship. And the teacher very often will develop a relationship with your parents, with your families. So it becomes much more intimate relation. And our schools, I think, are small enough for that to happen, especially our elementary schools. The other way to do it as well is to make sure that teachers are case conferencing. What that means very simply is that teachers come together as group, teachers and administrators come together on a regular basis, and they talk about kids. 1 kid, 2 kids, a group of kids, and talk about their achievement. They talk about what is happening. So if they have a child, for example, who's acting out, who's getting into trouble a lot, for the adults to come together into a case conference, perhaps with a social worker or a guidance counselor, and talk about this particular student. What is happening in your class, in your class, in your class? Look for commonalities and look for ways to solve the problem versus suspending them and throw them out of school. So when you begin to put the systems in place, you begin to see that relationship really, really develop. And it really is all about that kind of work in that kind of relationship. Educators also call this professional learning communities, where teachers come together on a regular basis to talk about instruction, to talk about curriculum, to talk about kids. Again, you develop a sense of a community that surrounds themselves to helping children learn.
So recently, you rode the bus to school number 16 and also Jefferson High School, and you have visited those schools. How was that visit for you?
Well, the visit to Jefferson was great. I saw the Newcomers Academy. I got to talk to a lot of students, and of course, all I kept hearing about was the lunch wasn't good, and the food was terrible, and we've got to do something about that. So Jefferson was a great visit. I need to go back and visit many more high schools, so to see what is happening grade 7 to grade 12. The ride, the school bus ride was also eye-opening for me. In that you saw kids very often who would miss the bus because they were late and they would miss school altogether. But the purpose for me riding the bus and in sitting talking to students or sitting with them in classroom is to see the work through their eyes, to understand what an elementary school child goes through from being picked up to being in school. And some of them fell asleep on the bus because 45 minutes on the bus riding, like the first one who was picked up, for example, fell asleep on the bus. So maybe we can look for ways to make that much more efficient, to minimize the amount of time a child sits on the bus to get to school. And maybe finding other ways to make the ride much more productive. So that, for me, again, opens my eyes to see what young children go to. What I also found out, and I also learned this from the former superintendent, Dr. Bill Calla, and Manny Rivera, that we have a number of our young children, kindergarten, first grade, because of where they live, they could live a mile from the school. They don't get picked up by a bus. But as we know, a child who's 6 years old is not going to walk a mile to school. So for us to find the money and to talk to the politicians to help us fund early childhood, early, grade bus, no matter how far they live from a school. My daughter lives with her mom on Long Island. She only lives a half a mile from the school, yet she gets picked up every morning by a yellow school bus. That district, every kid, no matter how old they are, except for the high schools, get picked up door to door. I think we should be able to do that for our kids.
Transportation is a big issue, and recently we were just talking about how the yellow buses and the transit buses had a little conflict, and they went to court. And can you elaborate on that and tell me what happened?
Absolutely. We'll have a press conference soon to talk about that. There was some issue with late law and the RTS around high school students being picked up door to door. And if RTS had lost this case, it would have cost us quite a bit of money this school year, and quite a bit more in the area, in the ballpark of $10 million next year, to create transportation for high school students. And as you know, money is never something that's plentiful in school districts. So that would mean cutting programs someplace else. But the good thing is that RTS actually were vindicated. They won the case. So now we can take the money and put it to good use to making sure it's improving student achievement. But I'm sure the high school students will rather ride the city buses than ride those cheese buses. So I think it's a win-win for many of us. But again, even with that win, I think it's a lot more work that we need to do looking at efficiencies around transportation in our district.
I noticed in recent news that we have a nationally certified teachers, which seems great for our district. And what is your thoughts on that?
It's another certification that teachers can get. It's a very rigorous process that they have to go through, and the fact that they're willing to do it without extra compensation, without just for the recognition, I think is fantastic. Like everybody else, teachers need to keep learning. Because again, if we're charging them with the development of our children, they have to stay on top of their game. So the people who have done that demonstrate to all of us the need for continual education and to keep looking to make yourself a better educator and to get better at your craft. So I applaud these teachers, and I welcome, and I wish more would do that.
I would like to thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Brizard. And I would like to leave you with the final question, which is, do you have any words of advice for Rochester students to continue throughout the school year? Sorry.
It's really one advice. Okay. Think about what happens after high school. Walk into ninth grade and have a 6-year plan. Whether it's world of work you're going to go to after high school, whether it's college, but to have a plan beyond that. My hope is that every child will go to college after high school, but every high school student should have a plan 2 years beyond high school. What will you do, and to begin preparing for that, and to persevere and never give up. And if they have a problem, issues, or concerns about the district, to email me directly, and we'll talk. And I'm looking to talk to groups of students, hopefully at every high school, and I would love for them to participate in that. But the one advice, think post-secondary, whether it's going to be getting a real certification or credential to go to work. I don't mean going to work in a fast food place. I'm talking about getting a license. They can actually get a meaningful job after high school, or plan on going to a 2 or 4 year college to get a college degree, and to work to that, and to never, never, ever give up.
I'd like to thank you again, Mr. Brizard, for spending your time with us. And this has been King Swank for Students First, and you have been watching SchoolView. Stay tuned.